Hey witches, this is Tiffany back on Bewitching.Bemused with a more relaxed fit, kind of casual video this week. Today I'm going to cover the 8 most common questions that I receive in the comments of my videos. Now most of these are related to specific witchcraft practices or spells. Some of them are a little bit more like, I don't want to say personal necessarily. Well, you'll see when we get there. The first one is a little bit more general. It is any question that follows the statement, I heard that. These are still typically very valid questions, but I do find that majority of the time when somebody starts a question with, I heard that, usually it's something that they've only heard once from one source. So I just want to make a blanket statement that if you have that floating around in your head of you have a question and you know, you heard something, I heard that, then first of all, and actually this probably goes for any question, if you want to see if something is true or not, if it's something that you heard, you should first of all consider your source. Where did you get it from? Now, just because something is in a published book doesn't necessarily automatically make it accurate and true. And just because you saw something said in a Reddit comment doesn't automatically mean it's not true or it has to be taken with a grain of salt. Although I pretty much take everything with a grain of salt. If you are seeing something from multiple sources, yeah, that adds a little bit of strength, but just because something is popular and it gets circulated a lot also doesn't necessarily mean that it's accurate. You also have to stop and consider, is this something that is tradition specific or practice specific? Is this something that is open to interpretation? Is this more opinion based and somebody is stating it as fact? Just really stop and analyze and critique your source of where you got this information, who said this information, and how do you feel about it overall? Also, I can link you to my video on fear mongering. If it's something that strikes up some fear inside you and you're going, you know, I heard this thing and it kind of freaked me out, there is a good chance that it's not entirely true. It might be partially true. Again, it just might require a little bit more backup research. It might also be a valid warning. Again, this first one is pretty much a blanket statement, but just use common sense, stop and critique what you've heard, judge based off of your own experiences. But with anything that you just kind of heard and you're going, is that true? Is that true? Well, first of all, I don't necessarily know that I'm the best place to ask, only because once again, I'm only one person and I don't think that my opinion should be the be all end all. I also don't think that my research in particular is the be all end all. I don't know everything. And there are so many things that are belief, tradition, or opinion specific that it doesn't necessarily mean that my opinion is the correct one or my belief set is gonna align with your belief set. Okay, sorry, this part was a little bit rambly and I'm really not answering a very specific question. And again, this is sort of a blanket statement. Even my dog is sighing loudly. Just anytime you hear something and you're questioning whether or not it's true, in general, if your question starts with, well, I heard that, ... just first of all, use common sense. Next of all, look at your sources, like research your sources. Where did they come from? What was the context in which you heard this? What is this person's practice and belief set that you are reading this from or you heard this from? What is their experience? Where did they get that information from? Is this something that could be experience specific, opinion, not fact specific, belief specific, tradition specific, so on and so forth? There's just a lot to consider. Is it also just fear mongering for whatever purpose that person might have for fear mongering outside of just giving a solid warning? You don't have to go about your life questioning every single thing that you hear, but I would always take pretty much everything with a grain of salt. Question number 2 is, can I bind, banish, or freeze more than one person at once? So this is a question that I get on the videos for all of those spells, and don't worry, I'll link all these spells down below if it's something you're interested in that you're, oh, I didn't know you made a video on that. I'll link it down below. So I have a video for binding, I have a video for banishing, and I have a video for freezing. And on all of those videos, I get a lot of people asking, you know, can I bind my coworker and my next door neighbor at the same time? This is going to be very context specific. So let's say you have a cousin who lies to the rest of your family about you all the time, and it causes a lot of strife for you and interfamily drama. Then you also have a next door neighbor who is lying to your landlord, saying that you're up all night making all kinds of noise and you've been getting noise complaints and warnings, even though you're sound asleep in the middle of the night. So they're lying or delusional or something. Now, just because you have two people with the same behavior you would like to bind, or freeze doesn't necessarily mean that you would want to combine those into the same spell. Times when I would combine things into the same spell is if these are people who are grouped together. So say you have multiple coworkers who are sort of working against you. You're up for a promotion. Maybe both of them are up for a promotion. They've been kind of whispering in your boss's ear, something like that. Then sure, yeah, I suppose you could do a binding or a banishing or a freezing on both of them grouped together. If you have a family of next door neighbors and all of them are causing problems for you, they're being loud and obnoxious, it's one family, they all live together, or a group of roommates, they all live together, they're up partying all the time, then yeah, I would work on them as a group versus each individual person. Also, random side note, sorry if you can hear my dog snoring. The reason that I recommend this is because if you are doing two separate things, you want two separate spells because you're going to be focusing on two separate sets of circumstances and visualizations. If you muddy the waters too much and make it too general, you're going to have a lot less success. Now let's take that example of those two coworkers. Whether or not they're collaborating together, it's similar circumstances, similar behavior. You could do them together or you could do them separate. Hopefully that differentiation makes sense. So my third question that I commonly get is on an ammonia jar and if you can put two situations into the same jar. This is going to be a very similar answer. If you're not familiar, an ammonia jar is used to reverse circumstances or reverse a situation. Oftentimes this is a situation that has already sort of played out and you want to revert back to how things were beforehand. But it could also be like, this is a situation that I'm in, that maybe I've been in for a while. I would love for the opposite of this to be occurring. That one can be a little bit trickier and require a little extra energy, but it is also another reason to do an ammonia jar. Again, don't muddy the waters by taking two disconnected situations, two disconnected people or groups of people, and trying to fit them into the same thing. Also, I want to say with that you shouldn't be, okay, this might sound harsh, but don't be lazy about your spell work. If you really want something, if you really want to manifest something or banish something, whichever it is that your goal is, don't be lazy about it. This is something that you really want for yourself and you really want for your life. Why are you trying to just take this easy way out? That's an unfortunate pitfall of a lot of people who get into magic, and these people don't usually stick around very long and they don't put a whole lot of work in and they don't see very good results. But trust me, it's really worth the time and energy to separate these things out and dedicate that time, energy, and ingredients, if it's heavy on ingredients or whatnot, into making these separate things into separate spells or rituals. If it's not worth to you taking that separate time and energy and set of ingredients and doing it separately, then how badly do you actually want it if you're not willing to put that work in? How badly do you think you actually deserve it if you're not willing to put that work in? But I'm not saying that everybody who wants to combo these things is doing so because they're being lazy. I also understand that spells do take energy and it can be exhausting, especially if it's a really big endeavor. And so sometimes if you're working against a big group of people or a really sticky situation, two situations that are tied together but could probably be done separate, I also do understand the reason that somebody might want to combine that into one spell, or if they feel like, hey, this might actually play out more smoothly if I combo it into one spell. Just like the previous question with the ammonia jar, yes, if the two circumstances are interrelated, then yeah, I would probably put that in one jar. If they're only kind of similar or tangentially related, then no, I would probably do two separate jars. I would pick which one is my number one priority or I need to start reversing first, focus on that, and then come back later and do the other one, maybe on a different day if I don't have the energy to do both of them back to back. Question number 4 is, I don't have this ingredient. Can I replace it for this ingredient in the spell? My answer to you is, I don't know. What I would highly recommend you do if you are replacing ingredients in a spell, and I do always tell you guys, get creative, customize your spells, personalize them, whether that's the incantation that you're saying or the creative use of the spell, the creative use of the intention of the spell, or in the ingredients that you're using. But this shouldn't be a matter of, I don't have any dried bay leaves on hand, but I do have dried basil on hand and they kind of look alike. So I'm just going to use that instead. Seems similar. Do the two have similar properties? Yes, in many ways they do, but also in many ways they don't. Again, this also comes back to don't be lazy, put the time and effort in, don't just like, sure, that worked. I've done a couple of different videos as well as a very thorough article on why I believe that people should personalize their spells, including their ingredients, as well as deciding on what correspondences mean to them as an individual practitioner, as opposed to just using a table of correspondences out of a book. Unless, of course, you're working in spirit magic, it's a little bit different. But I'm going to link that article down below to give you a very thorough explanation of why I believe this is important and how to go about finding correspondences for yourself. So instead of just taking X ingredient and replacing it with Y because it kind of seems similar, or that's just what you happen to have on hand, take the time to really stop and think about what is the purpose of X? What role does it play in this spell and what does it correspond to that matches up with my intention? Okay, so what other things would function in that same way? Matching correspondences, as well as what is this material, how is it being used in the spell? So for instance, if you're trying to replace something that is going to be burnt, you may not want to replace it with something that, like a crystal, that can't be burnt, even if the two have the same correspondences. So I will link that article down below for you guys. It's pretty long, I'm not gonna lie. It's probably like a good 15-minute read. But if you want to know more about creating your own spells, replacing ingredients, and personalizing spells to make sure that you are getting the most out of them, then I highly encourage you to read that. Number 5 is, I don't have this colored candle. Can I replace it with this color? Again, similar answer to the last question. You do want to stop and think about, why is this particular color being used and what other color has that similar meaning for me in particular. You don't want to go, oh, this calls for a brown candle. Well, I don't have a brown candle, but I do have this cream colored candle, and that's kind of like the same color if you just made it way lighter. However, I do think it's important to acknowledge this question separately from the previous question, because there is that bit of advice most of us have heard before where you can replace any colored candle with a white candle. Now keep in mind, white does have its own associations and correspondences. So a lot of the time that does come down to personal belief. However, people also, myself included, view white as being a more neutral color. I also view black as being a very neutral color. So sometimes it might call specifically for a white candle for white correspondences, or a spell might call for a black candle specifically for things that correspond with the color black. However, personally, if I need a red candle and I don't have it on hand and nothing else that I have seems to really fit, I would use either a white or a black candle in replacement of it, because I find both of those to be neutral colors. Admittedly, a lot of people will disagree with me when I say that I find black to be a neutral color. That's just my personal thing. I think black has neutral properties to it, but really that comes down to personal preference and what has been successful in your experience. So again, if you're wondering if you can replace this colored candle for another colored candle, consider the things that I mentioned in the last answer of consider what these colors both mean to you and how do they function within the spell and in context of your intention of the spell, but also know that you could use either a white or a black candle, although again, they have their own properties. They're both neutral states, and you can use either one to replace any other color. The next question that I have is one that comes either in response to the video on ammonia jars or in the comments section of that video. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, ammonia jars are frequently filled with the spellcaster's urine. And if not their urine, they might fill it with the chemical ammonia. Personally though, I do think there is a lot of value to using your own urine, but it's not a requirement. While store-bought ammonia is fine, I do go into the reasons of why I think that using your own urine is more impactful in the actual ammonia jar video. However, the question that I commonly get is, how am I supposed to fill a whole jar with urine? Okay, first things first, do not use a huge jar, not a big pickle jar, not a Costco-sized mayonnaise jar, just like a little jar. It doesn't even need to be like a full-size mason jar. It can be like a little tiny, So make sure your jar is not huge. Now, if your petition is so big and so long that you need to work with a giant jar, you should actually probably shorten the petition. You've probably overworded it, made it a little bit too complicated, or you're trying to put more than one situation into a single jar and they need to be separated out, like I mentioned earlier. If it's actually not that long of a petition, it might also just come down to you need to write a little tinier. Additionally, we have the highest ammonia content in our urine first thing in the morning, the first pee of the day. Unless you are one of those rare people who has a bladder that is the size of a marble and you have to get up throughout the night 10 different times to just keep emptying that bladder, and that's just the norm for you. In that case, I totally understand. You might just want to put a little bit of urine in there if you want to work with urine and fill the rest up with ammonia. Nothing wrong with that. However, the average person should have a pretty full bladder when they wake up in the morning, because not only are they drinking enough that their body is processing into urine throughout the night, but they should also be able to sleep through most of that sleep pretty soundly. But I do understand that some people have struggled with that sort of thing, sleeping through it, or they have that minuscule little tiny bladder that doesn't hold much. Or like me, they're pregnant and they've got a baby sitting on their bladder at all times. So I understand this doesn't apply to everybody, but for the majority of people, you should be able to sleep soundly through the night, get your bladder nice and full, and easily fill up a jar, no problem. If you're not able to, and you don't have issues getting up in the middle of the night to pee constantly, then you're probably not drinking enough water, to be perfectly honest with you. And that's not coming from my knowledge as a pagan or a magical practitioner. That's coming from my knowledge as a personal trainer and working in the health and fitness industry. At the end of the day, to answer the question, if you are working with a smaller jar, shorter petition, and you still, first thing in the morning, you just don't have enough, you're drinking plenty of water, but you just don't have enough urine to fill the jar all the way to the top, that's totally fine. If you would like to work with urine to get the added benefits to your spell, go ahead and do as much as you can and then top the rest off with bottled ammonia. Okay, we're down to the last two questions, which are less about spellcasting and magical practice and more about the way that I do things. So people commonly ask me why I do not cast spells for people. It is a tricky it's a tricky thing. So I know there are a lot of ethics involved in regards to selling spells. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. There are scammers out there who are just straight up lying to take your money. And yeah, obviously I have a problem with them. There are legitimate magical practitioners that are more than willing to work for you. But of course, they're not going to do that for free. And that I don't really have an issue with. But we're not here to answer that. So it's not an ethical thing, to be honest with you guys. It just comes down to time, resources, as well as it can be a little sticky when you are offering a service, but you're not offering 100% guaranteed results. And let's be real, you can't. Not in this industry. And if you come across anybody that is guaranteeing results, they're a scam artist. I have in the past sold spells to people. I have done workings for other people for money, and I have run into that problem enough times that I'm just not comfortable with it. But then on top of it, I just really don't have time for it either, to be completely honest with you guys. The last question that I get really commonly is, hey, why haven't you responded to my email, comment, or message? Why I don't respond to particular comments or emails is for a lot of reasons. Number one, I do get a lot of comments on my videos throughout the day. I'm constantly getting notifications on my phone and I'm trying to respond to some here and there. I also will go back once about every 2 weeks when I have time and try to answer questions, go through the comments. And the reality is sometimes they get lost. Same with the emails. I get a lot of emails and sometimes they just kind of get lost in the hustle and bustle of everything. So don't take it personally if I didn't reply, whether it was just a statement or a story you were sharing or a question that you had. Thank you so much for coming to me with it and for sharing. Hopefully somebody else in the comment section can answer your question for you if you have a question, or it's something that maybe you can look up yourself later on and do some research on. I just can't get around to everything. That's another big factor is time. So you guys got to keep in mind, I do this channel on top of having a full-time job, on top of having some freelance work as well. I'm also pregnant and about to be even busier because I'm going to have a newborn baby on my hands. And then I also have, you know, a social life and my own life and my own hobbies and passions and things like that. So I'm a really, really busy woman. Now, that's not to say that these things aren't important to me, but sometimes I do have to look at the questions, whether they're in the comments or the emails, and just sort of prioritize. I don't get paid per question, so it's not something that I can really interrupt my workday with. I also don't highly prioritize questions that are easily Googleable. If it's easy to just throw it into a search bar and find some valid, interesting discussions on the topic, then I don't necessarily have time to address it. Sometimes I will anyway, but sometimes I just don't. Then there's also questions that I receive that I actually answered in the video that the question is posted on. And I just think to myself, this person couldn't be bothered to take the time to watch the whole video. I get it, they're long videos, but it's because I try to be thorough so you don't have any questions at the end of the video. But if a person didn't take the time to catch that in the video, then why am I taking the time to answer it when I already did? To be fair, I understand that sometimes people just watch it sped up, or they might just miss a particular thing. That's fair enough, but again, I'm hoping that other people can come in and answer their question. And sometimes multiple people will ask the same question in the comment section. And so I don't want to answer each of them individually because maybe months and months back, I already answered somebody else. So it just takes a bit of scrolling to find. I'm not trying to be rude or ignore anybody or say that your questions aren't perfectly valid. It's just that I am a one-woman show here doing a lot of work. On top of my own life, I am still a person. And honestly, I don't make that much money doing this. If I could just make it my full-time job, then believe me, I would answer every question I ever got. Also, I've received some inappropriate questions. So if you've sent me an inappropriate question and I haven't answered, I've probably deemed it as, this is weird. You're not asking me because you want a legitimate answer. You're asking me because you're kind of a perv. I also refuse to answer the questions of people whose comments or emails are rude or entitled. I have some people that are very pushy and very demanding for me to take time out of my day for free to answer their question that, hey, they could probably look up somewhere else. Well, you know what? You go do that. I have one person in particular who, within the past few months, not only asked the same question multiple times, and the question was answered in the video they were commenting on, but then they started responding to other people's comments and questions saying, she ignores us, she doesn't answer questions anymore, she doesn't respond to comments anymore. No, I just don't respond to you. I'm not going to name names, but yeah, I'm not going to respond to you if you act that way. Anyway, if you guys found this interesting, give it a thumbs up. Let me know. I am more than happy to do more of these, make it kind of like a common questions series in the future. And you can leave any random questions that you have floating in your mind down below. I used to do this sort of thing in my live streams. I'm trying to get back to live streaming. Just the scheduling with my new living situation and with the pregnancy and everything has been really, really difficult. Now, if I could just pop in when I have insomnia at 2 a.m. every night and do it, yeah, sure, that'd be great. But a lot of you are not up. Some are, depending on the time zone. Some are not. And I also, don't live alone, so it would be kind of rude. So it's been difficult, but I swear I am trying to get back to the live streams. But if you have general questions, leave them down below. I can answer them in a follow-up video. Yeah. Don't forget, I listed those videos that I've referenced in this one down below, as well as articles that will answer these questions a little bit more thoroughly. So check those out in the description box, and I'll see you all next week.